Hello. Welcome to the 2020 LULAC Muscatine Political Forum. My name is Daniel Salazar, and I will be your host this evening. LULAC stands for League of United Latin American Citizens and is one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the country. The mission of LULAC is to advance the economic condition, educational attainment, political influence, housing, health, and civil rights of the Hispanic population of the United States. Tonight, we are joined by Republican candidate Nathan Mather. Mather is running for Muscatine Board of Supervisors District 4. In a training with Stanley, Lon, and Hunter PC, some key issues are COVID-19 response, economic development, and continuing improving access, effectiveness, and affordability of mental health. Before we get started, I would like to thank the Muscatine Community College for allowing us to use their facilities, and all the students here in the background are using this as a learning opportunity. Without the students here, they're making this possible for you at home. And as a reminder, LULAC is a nonpartisan organization. On that note, let's get started. Nathan, if I may.
Thank you, Daniel. Yep.
Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
So, and especially in these circumstances here. So, before we get into some of the more technical questions, I'd like to get to know more of Nathan Mather here. As I understand it, you went to New York for school, and you were there from 2004 to 2006. Tell me about that experience. And
Sure. So actually, I went to law school in New York at NYU University starting in 2001. I actually moved into my apartment, which was 3 blocks from the Trade Center, 3 weeks before 9/11.
Really?
And that was quite an experience. So my law school experience was in New York City against the backdrop of 9/11 and the recovery. But in 2004, I graduated from law school. Worked in New York City from 2004 to 2006 at a law firm there. Was recruited to join a big international law firm in New Jersey, at least in their New Jersey office. In 2006, I worked there from 2006 to 2009. And then everything kind of went crazy in 2008, 2009, as you may remember, with the markets. And about that same time, we found out we were going to have our first child, my wife and I, Jill. We're both from Muscatine, and we'd always wanted to move back. And so, the decision was kind of made, hey, now's a great time to move back to Iowa, where things are a little more normal and, we're a little more familiar.
And so now you're here.
Now we're here. Well, now I've been here for 11 years now. Doesn't seem like it, but it sure has been.
And then you're still practicing law here as well in Muscatine?
Yep. Born in Muscatine, and been practicing law here the last 11 years.
And how many children do you have altogether?
Got 3 kids. Let's see. They just all had their birthdays. They have them right in a row. So 11, 8, and 4.
Wonder, look at that. You remembered that.
I know, right? Well, I got it written on my hand right here. Just kidding.
Whatever. So, moving on. Tell me, the people of Muscatine sometimes tend to believe that sometimes our image or our relationship with other municipalities aren't always great. So, do you believe that Muscatine County could improve in their business and reputation with other municipalities? And if so, what steps should we take?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because, obviously, can someone improve? Someone can always improve. No one's ever perfect. But in my experience, I don't know that Muscatine County, and that's the office I've been serving in the last 4 years and running for re-election. Muscatine County seems to me to have a very good reputation, and I think some of the reasons for that is that we try to stay out of people's way. We try to make sure that whatever we're doing does not interfere with people's ability to make a living, doesn't prevent them from being able to pursue their own interests, their own freedoms. And I think that's one of the great things about Muscatine County. We have just an incredibly diverse group of people here with all kinds of backgrounds, skills, cultures, and so on. We have incredible business, wonderful institutions. And so, I think that there are always some things that we could do to improve. But I'll tell you the things that I think are important to people are, number one, what's your climate like in terms of your homes? Do you have affordable housing? And really, for me, that's one of the most important issues. That is probably the thing that we could best improve because we have all kinds of people here, whether it's from folks who commute in every day, and I think there's about 9,000 or 10,000 of those, to leaders of industry in town that have been, pillars of the community that don't live here anymore. And that to me is kind of sad. And I think that has a lot to do with our schools. That has a lot to do with our housing, and those are things I'm working to improve.
So, can you explain, if someone's watching,
Sure.
if there's someone who might not know exactly what the Board of Supervisors might do. Can you explain kind of sort of briefly what you do and how you affect
Sure.
their
Well, I
lives?
tell you, it's about the most glamorous job you can have because our three biggest things that we work on are roads, funding law enforcement, and mental health and public health. So I'm obviously being sarcastic when I say that. It's important work. It's a lot of behind the scenes work, but it's kind of the stuff that you don't notice. It's the work that you have to do to make sure that everything else is running. So those are the things that the County Board of Supervisors focuses on. Those are the three largest budget items that we deal with. But at the same time, we're always trying to make sure that we govern wisely, we use tax dollars wisely, we give voices to folks who need them, that we are able to consider needs all across the county. And I think we do a pretty darn good job of that. And I think the kind of the bipartisan consensus that we've built on the Board of Supervisors is solid evidence of that.
Now, you've stated before that some of your key issues, as I said earlier, are COVID-19 response, economic development, and mental health. Why? And what do you want to do?
Sure. Well, I think the why for COVID-19 is obvious. That's obviously the defining issue of the day. We have state and public health task forces that are doing a great job. And as a county board of supervisors, we're not out there running triage. We're not fitting people with respirators, but we help provide the resources to make sure that the folks who are doing that are able to do a good job. We've provided surplus and extraordinary funding to our public health department in the early stages of the disease from April to, I believe, July. And that's something that's very important to us. We're continuing to promote contact tracing. Something that's very important to me is we had a very high infection rate compared to most places in Iowa early on. And that's because it got into a few of our senior living centers. And what has been very important to me, and I've told our public health officials this, is when this is all over and we have a chance to stop dealing with an emergency and start figuring out how we can do things better in preparation for a next time, if God forbid there is a next time, we need to figure out why those most susceptible folks were so vulnerable from the get-go. In terms of mental health, there is no one who is not affected by mental health. 4 years ago when I was running for the first time, I was the only one I knew talking about mental health. And I'm not saying I'm the trendsetter. I just think that people have started to realize what an important issue it is because, if you go to the hospital because you broke your arm, no one thinks that's weird. But if you tell somebody, hey, I've got depression or I may be a little bipolar or what have you, people start to think, well, this is damaged goods. This person, there's a stigma attached to it. And as someone who's dealt with mental health problems all my life, I've experienced that personally. And I want to make sure that folks who experience that not only don't feel that stigma, but know that there is hope and help and they can overcome that. Because I think that's truly, truly important. And as for affordable housing, really everybody needs a place to live. Everybody has to have a place to put their head at night, and everybody wants to make sure there's a safe roof over their kids' houses. And frankly, it's too expensive in Muscatine County right now. To build a new house costs something like $200 a square foot, meaning even a 1,000 square foot house is $200,000 or more. And that's simply out of the price range of many folks who are just getting started. There's a shortage of renovated and redeveloped homes. And so we have folks who don't want to live here. And those who are unable to leave or who don't want to leave are forced to live in substandard housing at times. And that's truly sad because we need to make sure those folks are safe and they have opportunities to succeed.
And just a quick follow-up. You just, you said that it is too expensive. What specifically can you do to help with that?
Well, that's a great question because that's something we've been studying for the last several years. We've done a housing study in Muscatine County. We've tried to figure out, what are the inputs, because obviously there's a question of supply and there's a question of demand. Demand is very high because we have folks who come into here, into the county every day, work. It'd be a lot easier for them to live here. Unfortunately, the supply is low. One of those issues is the cost, and one of the reasons has been the cost of materials. There's nothing we can do about the cost of materials. That's kind of a global thing. But what we can do are make sure that the permitting costs, the regulatory aspects, the red tape of that housing development, housing starts, is kept low. I personally, as an attorney, have represented folks who have applied to the Iowa Finance Authority to secure grants for building affordable housing. I've represented clients who are putting up affordable housing on the west and southern sides of West Liberty. And as a supervisor, we need to as supervisors, make sure that the taxes stay low, that the services are there, and that we keep that red tape to a minimum, because that really drives cost in ways that you can't normally see. And so that's what we've been focusing on, and we're continuing to do that as well.
Thank you. So moving on.
Sure.
If elected, what steps will you take to diversify the Muscatine County workforce, boards, and commissions to reflect the needs and diversity of the county?
That's a great question. Right now, and I don't think a lot of folks know this, county government isn't just your county supervisors, your 5 county supervisors. There's all kinds of folks that we rely on within the county government that are employees of the county, like our maintenance supervisor, Oscar Alvarez, who's been there. This is a man who's got 2 master's degrees. He's a phenomenal individual. He helps oversee our construction projects. And having more folks like him, I think, is an incredible boon to the county. Another thing is that we've got all kinds of vacancies on our Board of Zoning, Board of Adjustment. I'm trying to remember all the ones we've got now, but we're always trying to find people who are willing to serve, because the work's not glamorous and the pay is non-existent, but it's work that has to be done. And the more voices and diversity we can get there, I think is great. But I also think it's important to recognize what we have done to promote diversity. I think I've had a lot of conversations with my fellow Republican candidates who are kind of leery coming on today. They're like, "Well, is LULAC a partisan group?" And I know you're not. But I also know that the president of LULAC is called our president a racist. And, I understand that. That's fine for folks to have their own views. But you can understand why it might make folks who are Republican reluctant to come on. But what I want to tell you is that the idea is that there's no reason Republicans and LULAC can't work together. There's no reason to think that Republicans aren't diverse. If you want to look at the diversity, and I've jotted down a few names in addition to Mr. Alvarez. Santos Saucedo was a few years ago elected as the first Hispanic city councilman of Muscatine and the first Hispanic county supervisor 2 years ago, a Republican. Ardith Slight is the only female chief sheriff's deputy in the county, in the entire state. Out of 99 chief deputies, she's the only female. Our outgoing county attorney, who was a Republican, hired an African-American assistant county attorney, a lesbian assistant county attorney, an Asian county attorney, and the rest, except for one, have been females. The amount of diversity that we have in the local government is absolutely, I think, surprising to most people. And it's not just in Muscatine County. We've got the first Iowa female senator, the first Iowa female governor. We're running 2 candidates right now that are female for the U.S. congressional seat. Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court, Marcia Turnus, was appointed by Governor Branstad, obviously a Republican. So the things that we do in Iowa and we do in Muscatine County, I think really reflect that diversity. And so I think it's important for folks to stop saying no diversity, and look at what actually has been done. Could more be done? Absolutely. But I think taking into account those voices that are already represented is phenomenally important. And that's why I'm personally very excited to support Mark Cisneros, who would be the first, if I understand correctly, the first state legislature in Iowa history to be from a Latin background, which I think is amazing. How is that possible that we've not elected a Latin person from Iowa, especially from the eastern part of Iowa, where we have such a strong Hispanic and Latin representation? So, I think the diversity that we do have is amazing, and I'm all for continuing to promote that.
So moving on here to the topic of immigration. So because of many immigrants and Latinos fear contact with government officials, what will you do to increase their access to your office and ensure their voices are heard while protecting their anonymity and those who are undocumented?
Sure, and I think I understand, but I want if you would clarify for me, what type of fear are you talking about?
Just a general fear of that it's not safe, and they're really mistrust with the government.
Sure. Well, first, I think the best thing that we can do is to make sure that we have candidates and people in leadership positions that look like everyone. If you see somebody who looks like you, you're more likely to trust them. And I'm not Hispanic. Obviously, I'm a white guy with a big red head. All right, that's who I am. But I did spend a year overseas once, and again, I'm not going to say that, spending a year overseas, or if I, spoke a few cheesy lines of memorized Spanish, that would instantly relate me to the Latino voter. But what I will say is that I understand what it's like to be a person in a strange land, far from home, who barely speaks the language, who doesn't know what the police are like, who doesn't know where the library is, what the basic institutions are, to be alone. And that's a terrible feeling. And so that's why we have reached out. That's why engagement is so important. And that's one of the priorities of LULAC. As I was looking through your guys' political agenda, one of them is engagement with law enforcement. I think that's phenomenal because, in my mind, the police are not to be feared. And I know I've grown up in a privileged background where I never had to fear that, but I do truly believe that 99.9% of the police out there, the law enforcement folks we have out there, are good people who put their lives on the line daily for us. And the more we can make that clear and make people comfortable with one another, make people engage with one another, I think that's wonderful. That's what we need to be doing. And we live in a culture now where it's super easy to bash somebody on Facebook. Half my friends are, Trump is evil, half my friends are Biden's a communist. And they don't talk to each other. I see people say, unfriend me if you believe this. What the heck is that? What the heck is that? How are we going to work together? How are we going to build a nation together if that's the way we treat? I think the most important word in LULAC is American. We are all Americans. We are all here. We all want this country to succeed. We all want it to be great. And so the way that we can work as a county is to say, hey, county jobs, that's what we do. If it comes to paving your roads, if it comes to funding the sheriff, if it comes to providing mental health care, those are the things we do. We're not ICE. We're not an immigration force. And I think it was 2 days ago, Captain Quinn Reese was saying, hey, federal government does its thing, we do our own thing. Our cops are our own, our sheriff's department are our own. And that's what I think. I don't want anybody to think they have anything to fear from me or any member of county government. We're here to serve you. And so, the outreach needs to be there. It's not just a one-sided thing. And so one of the things I've done, I've reached out to, I should go back a little bit. I represent a wide array of clients in family law matters, and one was a woman from Liberia who had immigrated, about 10, 11 years ago. This woman works 2 to 3 jobs. She just wants to take care of her kids, worship God in peace, and wants to be left alone to do it. And I had the honor and the privilege to help her do that in my representation. And in talking with her, I realized, I know that there's a Liberian community in town, but I don't know the Liberian community. So I reached out to the pastor at Calvary Church, Yenner, to learn more about him. And he and I are still trying to arrange a meeting, but I want to know what kind of services those folks need, because a county government should be serving everybody. So I realize this is a very long-winded answer. I'm prone to long-winded answers, but it's such an important issue. Don't fear your government. Fear when your government far, far away has too much power. Don't fear the people you shop with and see in school and see in the streets every day. If that's happening, that's a problem we need to fix.
Well, I think it's a very good closing answer there, because we are running out of time.
Oh, geez, sorry.
I do appreciate it. I think you were able to talk to the voters and get them to know your thought processes on a lot of different things. So moving on here, I'd like to give you a couple minutes here to just give your closing statement.
Sure. I don't know that I have a closing statement in particular, but there are 2 groups of people that I really want to focus on. The folks that think that they could never possibly see any agreement with someone who's a conservative, and folks that maybe that don't have English as a first language, or who feel that they've been oppressed by the establishment. And one of the things that I've really come to respect about LULAC was its founding values really trumpeted the primacy of the individual, that an individual has the ability to make his or her own destiny. They founded or included women in their organization a lot sooner than most groups. I think that's incredible. And so when I talk to those folks, I want to say, look, we can agree about some things, we can disagree about some things, but the questions at the local level, I think, are questions that we all want resolved successfully. How do we make sure that people have the best possible access to quality mental health care? what are the steps we need to take to make sure that the family down the street or your family or my family has a good place to live and a safe place where they don't have to be afraid? How do we make sure that there are good quality jobs? And these are the questions that we wrestle with on the Board of Supervisors week in and week out. These are the things that we focus on. And, one of my high school civics teachers, who I think was very liberal, I don't know for sure, but he said, there's not a Republican or a Democrat way to pave a road, all right? The things that we do really aren't party-oriented at this level. The things we do are people-oriented. So if you have a concern, if you have a question, bring it to us. We want to help, and I want to be, I'm asking for your vote for the privilege to continue to serve you in that capacity. So I'd ask for your vote for Nathan Mather on November 3rd. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Nathan Mather, it was a pleasure. Thank you for
Likewise,
coming in.
Daniel.
And to all you at home, ladies and gentlemen, do not forget to vote November 3rd. You can vote early, and there is same-day registration. Please tune in to our next interview with Michelle Servadio-Elias, running for Muscatine Board of Supervisor District 4. And all in all, thank you and good night. Hello, and welcome to the 2020 LULAC Muscatine Political Forum. My name is Daniel Salazar, and I will be your host for this evening. LULAC stands for League of United Latin American Citizens and is one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the country. The mission of LULAC is to advance the economic condition, educational attainment, political influence, housing, health, and civil rights of the Hispanic population of the United States. Tonight we are joined by Democratic candidate Michelle Servadio-Elias. And according to her website, she is a veteran, a retired registered nurse, and her goal is to help cultivate the health, wealth, and prosperity of all Muscatine County citizens. She is endorsed by the Quad City Federation of Labor, International Association of Bridge and Structural and Ornamental Iron Workers Local 111. She is also the state chair of the Veterans Caucus of the Iowa Democratic Party. Now, before we get started, I would like to thank Muscatine Community College for allowing us to use their facilities and all the students behind the scenes who are making this possible for all of you at home. And we would just like to remind everyone that LULAC is a nonpartisan organization. On that note, let's get started. Shelly, if I may, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Daniel, and thank you, LULAC.
Of course, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you so much.
So just to start off, we'd just like to know a little bit more about yourself. I read here that you are a veteran and you were a registered nurse. Just tell me about that time and how you got to this point here in your life.
Well, as a woman and a veteran and a retired nurse, I bring a point of view not found on the current Muscatine County Board of Supervisors. I think it's time that we focus on a strong public health and mental health, good roads and infrastructure, and making Muscatine County an equitable place for everyone to live. We need clean land and water, and getting women access to health care that they need. So I care about all of you, the citizens of Muscatine County and all of Iowa. And my whole life has been dedicated to serving others. So now running for office is how I can further serve my community, and I fulfill my civic duty. And for those of you who have been oppressed, know this, that I hear you, and that I have been boots on the ground, and I will continue to fight for you. Thank you for your support.
Nice. Thank you. So moving on, if elected, how would you manage collaborating with your colleagues on difficult county-wide issues?
Right?
Just whenever you're ready.
Right. All right, so you're right. Countywide issues are complex and they often require challenging solutions. And these solutions can only be achieved by building strong relationships where elected officials, department heads, and stakeholders work together for the common good. So, one of the things that I'm really good at is facilitating relationships, working together, where you get one side and the other side to come to the table and be peaceable. I'm good at research, looking things up and finding out what are the rules, what's the legislation, what are the precedents, what are laws in other states, how have other people done this and come to a solution, and how can we stop being polarized and come together and figure this out. And that's what I bring to the table, and that's where I'm different. That's how I bring that unique point of view and problem solve. And that's how we can be different. And I think that's how I can go and serve on other boards around our county, in our communities, and bring that different perspective as a nurse, as a woman, as a mother, as a veteran, all these walks of life and paths that I've walked, and I can bring that and help make our county a better place.
Wonderful, thank you. So moving on, this is again is just asking, what do you believe is the most pressing issue facing Muscatine County, and how would you work as a county supervisor to solve it?
Well, let me find that question, but I'm going to tell you it's public health. But I have it organized. I want to answer it the way I wrote it because it's important that I say it the right way. So, healthcare and the money to fund it is the most pressing issue. Good public health, local mental health services, and improving access to women's health care all need to be a high priority for the Board of Supervisors. We need to do everything that we can to facilitate access for all of our citizens and break down barriers to care. So, access to health care, it's not equitable right now for all of our citizens. So, healthcare is a human right. And right now, during pandemic, now more than ever, what we're seeing, when people are unemployed, they're losing their health insurance. And we need to fix that. We need to evolve in how we provide people their health insurance and their access to health care. And I would like for us to fix that, to work on that. And it needs to be, some of it's a legislative fix, some of it's going to be a federal fix, but also how we do the tax levy through the legislative side, but also what relief can we give our citizens here at the county. We've had a lot of deaths in our county from pandemic. Maybe at the county level, we need to give relief to these families. There's a lot of things that we need to be exploring. What can we do to help our citizens? And what barriers do we need to break to make sure that everybody has education, has access, and how do we protect people that are afraid to come forward, that need access to health care, but they're afraid that maybe if I come forward, I could get reported. And then that's a barrier, because during pandemic, that could maybe make pandemic spread. We've got to break those barriers to care down because we have to protect everybody, especially our frontline workers. So this is also key.
So,
Thank you.
So first off, thank you for your service, by the way. And as a woman in the service, that is a barrier that is in and of itself.
Yes.
So could you tell me, just expand more, why is mental health and public health, why are these things so important, and why should people focus on that?
Well, the consequences of not being proactive actually end up increasing the costs. It increases length of stay. The research is there. If you go and you research this, when you are proactive in your approach and you break down barriers of care to access to care over time, you're going to decrease your costs to the county. And so this is a huge benefit. If you just wait until someone gets really, really sick because they haven't accessed care when something was a little problem, then they wait till they're really, really sick, and then they use the ER for their primary care. Then they just end up really, really sick, and they go to the ICU for their primary care. Then you end up with like a $10,000 bill for a one-night stay in the ICU. You know, then this is devastating financially for a family. They end up bankrupt because they can't afford their care. And had they just had everyday care, say they're just managing diabetes, had they got care early on and managed something with diet, exercise, weight loss, you know, say we're managing diabetes, this could have been something that was just managed with daily care cheaply versus waiting till it's like a catastrophic illness and a stay in the ICU because they didn't get care with education early on. So breaking down barriers to care. And so people that have diabetes, for example, are often people in the Latinx population. This is a illness that certain populations are more prone to. And this is where public health, this is something that we can focus on. So it's important that we fully fund public health. It's important that we make sure that everybody has access to good health care. And it's important that we're proactive with our approach.
So yeah, so treating it with the respect it deserves as a problem initially, because if we don't, it can snowball into something bigger.
And it's important that we have social equity in our approach to health care, that we treat everybody equally, regardless of who they are or where they come from or what color their skin is. And as a nurse, that's how I always treated people, and that's how I treat people still.
Can you talk more about social equity and just, I guess, instances where that's not happening?
Every day. I mean, look around. Our president does this every day. And unfortunately, over time, it's become normalized, and I think people are desensitized to it. But, I mean, I was watching the debates, and, you know, we're talking about children being separated from their parents. Asylum is a human right. I can't say it enough. Seeking asylum is a human right. And we should not be, as a country, being cruel to human beings as a deterrent. And we shouldn't make people camp out on the border in Mexico in a camp and deny them access to our country. We shouldn't separate children from their parents and make it so that they never can find their parents again. The Department of Homeland Security just increased the cost to $2,500 on October 19th for people that are filing for the visas, the work visas. But we expect these people to work for very low wages, be our frontline workers, you know, and we expect them to hold us up during pandemic. But at the same time, we create no clear path for them for citizenship. And so one day we expect them to hold up our whole food chain, but then, you know, when it's politically expedient, then we want to have ICE raids and deport them. We cannot have it both ways. We must take care of people. We must offer them access to health care. We must create paths to citizenship. We must not separate families and torture people. That must not be the American way. That must not be our legacy, and that must not be the America that my children grow up in. It is not what I fought for. It is, as a veteran, that is not what I believe in. And for people who try to say, you know, how dare you disrespect a veteran? Well, I am a veteran, and I do not need people to tell me what I think. or what offends me. I am speaking.
So, kind of going off what you were saying about caring for people, if I may, um, as county supervisor, what kind of things would you try to do to help frontline workers and people affected by COVID?
Well, if the good people of this county would honor me with their vote, I will value them and respect them, and I will work very hard. I will be one person, but it will be my job to affect and influence positive change everywhere I go. And I will do my best to advocate for people. If they come to me, I will find the answers, and I will do my best to find the resources that they need so that they can apply for the help that they need, so that they can become documented. There's churches that help. My church in the Quad Cities, they have legal aid to help people that want to apply for help so that they can become documented. I know that there's local resources here in Muscatine where people can go. I will make every effort to help people that come to me that need help.
So, moving on, this next question involves diversity. So, the question is, if elected, what steps will you take to diversify the Muscatine County workforce, boards, and commissions to reflect the needs and diversity of the county?
Right. So, our county has one of the biggest immigrant populations in the state. And your your boards, your committees, your public works departments, your all of this should be reflected. The people that are hired, if you have like 25% of your population is immigrant, or it's black, or it's Latinx, then that should then carry forward and be reflected in and distributed in who's hired, who sits on these boards. These people we should be equitable. So we should have social justice, we should have social equity, we should have, if we have, 10 people sitting on this board over here, then we need to make sure that we have a representative population. This much of the population is this, then this many people sitting on this board should be represented. It should be equitable and distributed. They should have a seat at the table, and they should have a vote, because the people on this board are going to vote their interest, what benefits them the most. And if you don't, things widen out and you begin to have disparity. And then that leads to systemic racism. And we've seen this over time, over the years, throughout the decades. You see this in redlining, you see this in Chicago, you see this in the neighborhoods, in school districts, in access to health care. You see this in the way roads are built, in the way neighborhoods are laid out, school districts, in the way highways are laid out next to factories, and then little neighborhoods get tucked in around them, and then those school districts are very poor, and then the people are voting for funding. Well, then the funding goes to these schools over here, but no funding goes to these schools over here next to the factories. And then these children don't get the access to the good band and the good art programs and the good scholarships, and then things widen out and you have great disparity. And then we have pandemic, and what happens? These kids are more likely to die than these kids. And then what happens? We have systemic racism, and then we have higher death rates. And then this is where public health comes in. And then you have this big circle of everything that we've been talking about. Systemic racism causes death. And so everything that we do, from how we hire people, how we give them access to health care, to how we make sure we put people on boards, and how, everything. We have to make sure that we have social equity and economic justice. Everything has to be fair. And it starts with how we vote. It's your voice. And if you don't participate in elections, if you don't use your voice, then you don't make sure that people have a seat at the table that will be your voice and represent you and make sure that these things don't keep happening.
Now we're moving on to our last question here, and I'm trying to answer somewhat quickly. I know you're someone who's very involved in the community. Could you talk a bit about things that you have done, things that you are involved in, and so on?
Where do I start? What exactly do you want to know? Okay, so I don't know specifically what you want me to talk about here. I mean,
how are you involved in the community?
Which community? I wear so many hats.
Well, talk about
I
some
kind
of
of
them.
jump around. Okay, so I'm chairwoman of the Veterans Caucus for Iowa Democratic Party. So veterans from all over the state elected me to be their voice. So what I could tell you that's really important about that is I represent them but it's not my voice. I'm not saying I want to do something. I talk to them, I listen. And when we need to get something done, we all come together and if there's someone that needs help, for example, I will pull my network together and I'll say, we've got someone over here, like this young lady recently. I think you know a little bit about what I did. But Joe Henry was asking for help, and we had a young soldier in Kansas City, a young female, that needed help desperately, and her family was asking for help. And she had been sexually assaulted and had tried to report it and had asked to be moved to another base. And so that happened. But unfortunately, the sexual assault and the history of it followed her to the next base, and she was still being harassed. And then she ended up being put in basically what happens when you threaten to report and you are getting harassed. Sometimes they'll put you in a psych ward and then not let you out and not let you have any contact with your family. And her family was getting very worried and wanting help. And the family had tried to contact Senator Joni Ernst, but Joni Ernst had refused to intervene and had said that it was up to this young soldier's chain of command. So now we're in a situation where this is very familiar, like what happened to Vanessa Guillen. And so, as chairwoman of Veterans Caucus, what I can do is call on the people that are members of the Veterans Caucus from all over the state of Iowa and say, who has experience here? Who can help? And so we have a member of the caucus, Tom Beckett, who has JAG experience and legal review experience. So I facilitated connecting him with Mr. Henry so that he could do legal review of all the documents and documentation and see how could he help this family and this young woman. I called the chair of the Iowa Democratic Party, Mark Smith, and asked him, could he please speak to our local legislators so that they could step in and also help this young woman. Because if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And this young woman, she's a native Iowan, and she needed our help. So I called up my army. She's a young female. She needs help. She's been sexually assaulted. She's had 8 years of no problems with her career, and now all of a sudden she ends up, when she wants to report, now she's having all these issues, and this can follow her for the rest of her life. And she's actually exhibiting signs and symptoms of PTSD, which I'm very familiar with. I mean, she's textbook right now. And so what she really needs is, she needs our help. And so that's that's one day.
Right.
That's just like one day, one thing that I did like one day. And so our caucus, we had a meeting, we came together, we got our resources together, and then I handed it off. So I delegated and facilitated. And that's just part of being a